Have you ever wondered what you would do if you were called a ridiculous old woman in front of your own family? Imagine hearing those words during your grandson's party, in front of everyone, unable to react. I never thought this day would come. What I felt there, no one can explain. The room was full, people were talking, cake was on the table, but suddenly, everything became strange. A loud voice, followed by silence, and the feeling that the ground had dropped away. I still remember Noah's look, frozen, uncomprehending. No one did anything. It was then that I realized how much a lifetime of struggle can be dismissed in a few seconds. But none of this happened by chance. Before I tell you what came next, you need to understand what my life was like up until that point. I was born on November 23rd, 1946, in a small house in the suburbs of Newark, New Jersey. I always thought that, with time, the weight of life would become lighter. But the truth is that some marks just change location. I grew up in a family that had nothing but willpower and a few cents to earn my daily bread. My father woke before 5 in the morning to work as a truck driver, and my mother made do sewing for neighbors. By the age of 7, I already knew how to make strong coffee in an aluminum kettle, because I was the first to get up and the last to sleep. I shared a room with 2 brothers, and when it rained heavily, leaks were part of our routine. The school was public, on the corner of our street. I walked almost 2 kilometers every morning, braving the winter cold and the jokes of some girls who never missed a chance to point out my worn shoes. I learned early on that respect isn't earned by pity, but rather by what we endure in silence. I was never one to fight, but I also never bowed my head to anyone. At 15, I started working in a fabric store to help out at home. It was there that I learned to calculate change on my own, negotiate prices with suppliers, and never let anyone speak louder than me, at least not without a response. In 1967, when I was 21, I met Henry. He was 2 years older, tall, with brown hair and the hands of someone who'd been through it all. He worked in an auto repair shop and went to night school. He didn't arrive with pretty words or empty promises, but with an invitation for coffee after work. Our first date was at a simple diner with fluorescent lighting, apple pie, and an old radio playing Frank Sinatra. Over time, we saved money, slowly building what I called our real life. In 1971, we married in a modest ceremony attended only by close relatives in the local church hall. The reception featured a simple cake, orange juice, and the loud laughter of our older aunts. In the early years, life wasn't easy, but Henry possessed a strength that inspired me to keep going, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. After much effort, we opened a used clothing store together downtown. We started small, with just 3 racks, a counter, and an old cash register, which I repaired myself several times. It didn't take long for the store to grow. I hired 2, then 5 employees, and before I turned 35, I was running a small empire of thrift stores spread across 2 neighborhoods. I woke up early every day, smelled the strong aroma of coffee wafting from the kitchen, packed boxes of merchandise, organized orders in the black notebook, and made a point of greeting each employee by name. Henry left too soon. In 2003, a car accident took the man I loved most. I'll never forget the call. It was a Monday, 4 in the afternoon, when the phone rang, and the news arrived in a harsh voice with no room for tears. After his death, I had to be strong all the time. I had to learn how to sign contracts, negotiate store leases, deal with inspectors, suppliers, and inventory issues. The store became my second home and, in a way, my shield against loneliness. Today I live in a middle-class neighborhood here in Boston, in a single-story red brick house with a white picket fence and a small yard. The address is 129 Oakfield Avenue. My routine is simple, but it has its little rituals. I make coffee in the French press. I enjoy the smell wafting through the kitchen, and I drink it sitting by the window, looking out at the empty street at 7 in the morning. I always set aside time to prepare gifts for Noah, my 8-year-old grandson. He loves toy cars, dinosaur books, and board games. He's my companion on Saturday mornings, when he wakes up early just to listen to my stories from the past. My relationship with Lisa, my daughter-in-law, has always been polite, but full of unspoken details. She's the type who speaks softly to strangers and loudly to those she knows well. We've never had a fight, but we've never been friends either. There were small jabs, awkward silences, looks like she's calculating every word before speaking. I feel like, from the beginning, she saw me as a threat, perhaps out of fear of losing her place in the family. My son, her husband, has always tried to play the role of mediator, but in practice, he's stayed away from the eye of the storm. So, I've learned to live with it, without forcing any rapprochement, but without backing down from my convictions. The week of Noah's birthday, the house looked different. I woke up early to buy cake ingredients, packed the gift bags, and ordered blue and green balloons from the corner store. The invitations were ready 5 days in advance, handwritten because I appreciate that kind of attention, and delivered to Noah's classmates. The day before the party, the smell of the cake baking filled the house. The clock read 6:20 p.m. when I finished wrapping the last gift. The sound of Noah's voice echoing through the house, asking for help assembling a toy, was music to my ears. And between tasks, my mind raced. Memories of everything I'd built, every hardship, every struggle, all pounding as I finished another ribbon tie. What I didn't know was that those ordinary days were about to turn into the biggest test of my life. Now tell me, when was the moment in your life when you felt like the ground might disappear from under your feet? Have you ever faced a situation where the fear of losing everything overcame your will to move forward? Write in the comments what your attitude would be if you had gone through what I experienced, or share your own story of overcoming adversity here. I want to know how far you would go to defend your worth when no one seems to see your struggle. On Saturday, February 24th, 2024, I woke up at 6:20 a.m., washed my face, went to the kitchen, put water on to boil in the French press, and started getting things ready for the party. Noah was bouncing around the house, asking about the cake, his friends, the balloons. At 9 o'clock sharp, I carried 3 gift bags to my son's car, loaded everything into the trunk, and headed to the condominium's main hall. We arrived before everyone else, except the doorman, who was already setting up chairs in the blue hall, the same one where Noah's christening had been held 2 years earlier. The room filled up within half an hour. Children ran around the tables, some wearing baseball jerseys, others trying to steal Brigadeiro from the tray. In the back, the cake was decorated with dinosaurs and the name Noah in green letters. The smell of coffee mingled with soda, and the adults chatted in low voices, exchanging impressions of the traffic, the weather, and school. Lisa arrived 15 minutes later, wearing high heels, a black dress, her hair tied in a neat bun. She greeted everyone with that brief smile, shook hands with 3 relatives, and went to set the dessert table. I stood to one side, tying a bow on the gift bag without much room to talk. It's not that I don't like parties, I just never felt like I truly belonged when the conversation turned to expensive trips, fashion apps, topics that had never been part of my routine. I strolled around the room, helped a boy tie his sneakers, got a cup of soda for the neighbor's daughter, and heard Noah call me from afar, wanting me to see a new toy. When it was time to say, "Happy birthday," everyone gathered around the cake table. The clock read 11:27. I stood next to Noah, holding the candle as he smiled for the photos. When everyone started singing, I looked around and realized how invisible I felt, even surrounded by family. After the "Who will it be with?" they began serving the cake. Lisa approached her husband, whispered something in his ear, and returned to the table. 2 minutes later, she called my name loudly, with everyone listening. "Rose, can you step out of here for a bit? I need to talk to you." I walked over to her, thinking it would just be a comment about the decor. But before I could get close, Lisa turned to me and spoke so loudly that even the doorman stopped outside. "Ridiculous old woman, you're nothing. You're no boss around here." The room froze. Noah stared at me blankly. My son stood there, motionless, unresponsive. For a second, I felt my face heat up. My breath caught. I tried to respond, but my voice wouldn't come out. The children stopped playing. Some mothers looked away, others whispered, as if that kind of thing wasn't their problem. I felt my sweaty hand grip the strap of my bag tightly. The ground seemed harder to walk on, and I realized how uncomfortable my presence was for that woman. I didn't hear anyone defend me. Not a word, not a gesture. The silence weighed more heavily than anything else said there. An aunt on my right pretended to be on her phone. A cousin grabbed a slice of cake and went out onto the porch. 2 of Lisa's classmates made awkward conversation to hide their embarrassment. I looked at Noah, standing there, wide-eyed, unable to say anything. Time passed slowly in that moment. I felt my mouth dry. I tried to swallow, but I couldn't. Everything I'd experienced, Every hardship seemed worthless in that moment. The insult echoed over and over in my head. I took a deep breath, but it seemed like no air would come in. I counted to 10 in my head, as I'd done for years to avoid reacting impulsively, and tried to maintain my composure. I saw Lisa's hand tremble slightly as she stared at me. Her gaze was cold, steady, as if she were waiting for me to break down right there, in front of everyone. No adult in the family said anything, not even my own son, and that hurt more than any words. The room grew colder, the laughter giving way to whispers. I stood there, listening to a buzzing sound that mingled with low voices and laughter that was no longer meant for me. I glanced at the clock in the ballroom. It read 11:42. I thought about running, but my legs wouldn't budge. I grabbed my bag and slowly turned away, feeling everyone's eyes on me. I walked through the door, the sound of chairs scraping behind me, and out into the hallway. The party continued inside, but for me, what was to come was still far worse than anything I'd ever experienced in that ballroom. The silence of that room still weighs heavily. Stories like these need to be heard. Like and subscribe to the channel now, because anyone who's been through it knows the worst was yet to come. I walked down the hallway, my shoulders heavy, my legs stiff as if I'd suddenly doubled my age. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a mixture of anger and shame that almost made me turn back, just to ask for respect, but at the time I didn't even have the courage. The echo of laughter mixed with the sound of dishes hitting the table kept hammering in my head. I walked slowly, looking like one of those people who tries to inconspicuously, but in reality, everyone is noticing. I opened the glass door, felt the icy wind outside, and had to stop for a moment on the sidewalk to control the urge to cry right there. No one came after me. Not a question, not a look of pity, nothing. I glanced at the clock on my phone, 11:55, and began walking aimlessly, only thinking about what had just happened. My right hand felt sweaty, my face hot, and my chest tight. What hurt most wasn't the insult, it was the silence from my family. I remembered every birthday party I'd organized, every gift bag, every time I'd given up a night's rest to help someone in the family. All that effort seemed worthless, discarded the minute I became a nuisance. I tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like it was trapped in my chest. I didn't want to give in. I didn't want anyone to see me crying, but I wanted to disappear, to erase myself from that party, that building, that family. I passed the condominium's playground, saw the colorful balloons stuck to the fence, the voices inside growing more and more distant. When I reached the gate, I realized I had nowhere to go. My car was parked in spot 3, but I couldn't bring myself to drive. I leaned against the fence for a few minutes, trying to gather my thoughts. The pride that had held me back my entire life seemed like an impossible burden to bear in that moment. I thought of my mother saying that respect is earned with attitude, but what do you do when no one sees who you really are? I remembered Henry, how much he hated fighting, but he never let anyone put me down. I realized I was there, 77 years old, at the door of a salon full of people I'd helped, and yet no one thought I was worth defending. I ran my hand over my face, feeling my eyes sting, but I didn't let a tear fall. I walked slowly to the car, opened the door, and sat in without starting the engine. I looked at the dashboard, the glove compartment full of old papers, the empty gift bag on the passenger seat. The silence inside the car was different from the silence in the salon. There was no judgment here, just the realization that I was completely out of place. I considered calling a friend, but who would understand without thinking I was overreacting? I picked up the phone, but my hand was shaking, so I put it down. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw some guests leaving early, looking away as they passed my car. I couldn't stand still, so I walked back to the building's gate, feeling the cold breeze on my face. I walked to the corner, passing the bus stop where, years ago, I'd waited so many times for Henry to get off his shift at the garage. My chest ached with longing and shame, a strange mix of wanting to be invisible and at the same time shouting for everyone to hear. A lady passing by on the other side of the street glanced quickly, noticed I wasn't well, but didn't say anything. Everyone's in a hurry. No one wants to hear an old woman's problems. I sat for a few minutes on the concrete bench near the basketball court, feeling my left hand throb. I stared at the lines etched into the ground, the old marks from my son's childhood. The party was still going on inside, the voices muffled, the children's music leaking through the windows. With each laugh I heard, I felt a little more ashamed. What Lisa had done wasn't just an insult. It was a reminder of everything I'd heard throughout my life, that old women are useless, that it's best to keep quiet, to stay out of their own way. It ate away at me. But still, I stood there, motionless, trying to pick up the pieces of what was left of my pride. I tried to think about how things could have been different. Maybe if I'd spoken more firmly to her in our previous encounters. Maybe if I'd commanded more respect years ago. The fact is, no one there thought I was worth defending, and that absence weighed far more heavily than any insult. I just wanted to disappear for a few days, hide from the world, the noise, the memories. The clock on my phone read 12:13 when I finally decided to head home. I walked slowly to my car, feeling every step, every bad memory, every unspoken word. Before getting in, I looked up at the gray sky, took a deep breath, and thought, no one knows how much an insult can truly hurt. In that moment, all the strength I thought I'd accumulated over the past few years seemed worthless. People went on with their lives. The party continued, as if I wasn't missed. But something burned inside, a mixture of shame and a desire to fight back, to prove to myself that I wasn't just what they said I was. But in that moment, what I really wanted was to disappear. Little did I know that that afternoon still had much to teach me. When I finally got home, I dropped my bag on the living room floor without even looking back. The kitchen clock read 13:20. The house was silent, only the distant sound of a dog barking in the street. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, my back heavy, my eyes burning. I didn't cry, but I also couldn't think of anything other than Lisa's words hammering in my head. Me, ridiculous old woman. Me, nobody. My face tingled with shame. I ran my hand over the blue comforter and looked at Henry's framed picture on the dresser. The photo was from 1992, him in a striped shirt, that wide smile, his arm around my shoulder the day we bought our second store. I stared at him, remembering the strength that held me upright for so many years. I thought about how many times I'd heard I'd amount to nothing, ever since I was little. The difference was, back then, it didn't hurt so much. I closed my eyes and let my memory drift back to the past, to the days when shame came on the plate along with the stale breakfast bread. I remembered my mother telling me to keep my head down and hold on tight. My father sweating in the truck, my brothers sharing a blanket in the winter. I overcame each humiliation without ever asking anyone for anything. But now, after so long, it felt like it all came rushing back. Every word Lisa said opened an old scar. For a moment, I wanted to disappear from the world, disappear forever, never have to face anyone again. I stood there motionless for several long minutes, feeling the weight of each defeat, of each minute, lived as if it had passed in vain. The sound of the clock on the wall was the only thing marking the passage of time. After a while, I don't know how long, I got up. I went to the bathroom, washed my face with cold water, and stared at my reflection. I saw the marked skin, the tired eyes, the strands of white hair emerging. It wasn't just fatigue. It was a mixture of shame, sadness, and an anger I hadn't felt in many years. At that moment, I did what I always did when there seemed no way out. I closed my eyes and prayed softly. I asked for clarity. I asked for strength. I asked God to give me a sign of what to do. It was strange, but that prayer calmed me. I returned to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and rested my forehead on my knees, trying to gather my thoughts. I remembered Henry once again, the way he'd say, life wasn't all about victories. You're stronger than you think, Rose. Those words had always been my refuge on the worst days. I looked at my dresser drawer. Inside, among old documents and old receipts, was the brown envelope I'd kept for almost 5 years. The will, signed by me and 2 lawyers. I'd always kept it secret as a precaution. It was my way of ensuring that what Henry and I had built wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. At the time, I made a point of asking the lawyer for detailed explanations, knowing every comma, every condition of the document so as not to be deceived. He explained that the will was a legal instrument that officially determined who would go to the assets registered in my name, the house, the store, and my remaining savings. Without that paper, many people think they can do whatever they want after we're gone. I opened the drawer slowly, feeling my way until I felt the thick envelope with my name written in blue pen. I held it tightly, thinking about everything that paper meant. It was the symbol of my struggle, my story. I sat back down on the bed, unsealed the envelope, and read every line of the document, checking the date, names, and signatures. I remembered the conversations in Dr. Miles's office, the clear instructions not to discuss anything with anyone until the right moment. I closed the envelope, placed it on my lap, and took a deep breath. In that moment, I understood that I wouldn't accept that fate. Not anymore. I'd already spent my entire life proving my worth. I wouldn't let them erase me like that, without a fight now. Shame gave way to a harsh decision, an almost cold desire to show everyone who I truly was. I decided, right then and there, that this time would be different. I wouldn't run away. I would fight with what I had, with the right weapons. It was time to bring justice, even if no one was expecting it. And it was at that exact minute, with the clock striking 14:07, that I promised myself that the Rose who left that party would never be the same again. The rest, no one could predict. The following days were a test of patience and self-control. I got up early as usual, made my coffee, and opened the window to watch the street activity. But inside, nothing was the same. The humiliation of the salon was still on my mind. But now, along with the pain, there was a kind of constant alert, as if any detail could make a difference from then on. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, who always called on Wednesdays, nor Noah when he came to ask for help with his homework. I started to act automatically, responding to messages, participating in the family WhatsApp group as if everything were normal, but every word was measured. On Tuesday morning, I organized the papers on the living room table and double-checked the will. I reviewed every clause, every name, to ensure no one could challenge it later. I called Dr. Miles's office, scheduling an appointment without mentioning the reason. Wednesday at 9:30 in the morning, I sat in the overstuffed chair in the waiting room, breathing in the strong smell of stale coffee mixed with cheap receptionist perfume. The lawyer welcomed me into the conference room. A long table, 4 chairs, diplomas hanging on the wall. I handed him the envelope and asked him to reread everything with me, line by line. He reviewed it calmly, explaining the details again, that the assets were registered in my name, that the distribution of the funds and the house were protected by law, that the signatures of both lawyers and the notarized date left no room for error. I confirmed that no one but me knew about the document. Dr. Miles asked if there was anything urgent going on. I simply said I needed to make sure everything was ready when needed. He smiled, that professional smile of someone who's seen too many family fights, and said the decision was mine. I left the office with the envelope in my bag, my head full of plans, but my face impassive. I returned home, sat in the armchair by the window, and watched the street. With each passing car, each neighbor crossing the sidewalk, everything seemed slower, more calculated. I spent the week eating little and sleeping poorly. I reviewed the document 3 more times, once before bed, once right after lunch, and the last time on Friday, when the house seemed even quieter. In the family group, Lisa sent photos of Noah, messages about a new haircut, and made a point of showing everyone a normal life. My son remained distant, speaking little, always busy. The conversations between us became even more automatic, emotionless. I knew the silence was a strategy, but no one could have guessed what I was about to do. On Saturday, while cleaning out the kitchen cupboard, I found the old black notebook where I'd kept track of the store's expenses. I leafed through the yellowed pages, remembering the sleepless nights organizing accounts, the days I'd had to come up with solutions when the cash register wouldn't close. It was then that the idea of acting coolly became stronger. No scandal, no arguments. It would be just me, the documents, and the truth in front of everyone, with no room for hidden arguments or manipulation. I spent all Sunday organizing the details in my head. At breakfast, I watched Noah play on the living room rug. I didn't say anything, just watched from afar, preserving the image of him in his blue pajamas, distracted by the plastic dinosaurs. When he came to hug me, I silently promised that no one would erase that scene. Every gesture was calculated, every sentence thought through. Late in the afternoon, I took the envelope, double-checked that everything was in order, and hid it inside my favorite book, the one I alone read in the house. The clock in the hallway struck 18:10 when I finished preparing everything. I sat waiting, listening to the sound of the wind in the garden leaves, ready for the next family gathering. I knew there would only be one chance, and it had to be in front of everyone. Sunday dawned cold, with a cloudy sky and a strong wind swaying the trees outside. I made my coffee as usual, but this time without rushing, feeling each sip warm my hands. I put on my beige wool sweater, grabbed the envelope, and put it in my coat pocket, double-checking that the zipper was closed. At 11 o'clock, I got in the car and drove through the nearly empty streets to my son's house, a corner house with a low wall and an unkempt garden that always reminded me of Henry pruning the rose bushes on Sundays past. The family was all gathered in the living room, chatting loudly, the smell of roast meat wafting from the kitchen, dishes being set on the 6-seat table. I greeted everyone politely, sat at the head of the table, and made a point of looking everyone in the eye. Lisa came over to me, a forced smile on her face, put her hand on her husband's shoulder, and began talking loudly about how she'd organized everything, how tired she was, how difficult it was to keep the house tidy without help. I pretended to listen, but didn't respond. I remained silent, holding the envelope in my pocket, feeling the hard paper touch my fingers. Noah ran to hug me, sat next to me, and asked about the gift he'd received last week. Lunch was served at 12:20, and everyone sat down, filled their plates, and toasted the weekend. During the meal, Lisa began to tease, insinuating that some family members weren't cooperating, that certain helpers only got in the way, that older people should know their place. I felt my face heat up, but I didn't react. I let her speak. When I saw everyone was distracted, I took advantage of a lull in the conversation. I lightly tapped my hand on the table, asking for silence. Everyone looked at me, first suspiciously, then curiously. I took the envelope, placed it on the white tablecloth, and opened it calmly, without rushing. I spoke softly but clearly, letting each word flow without a tremor. I need everyone to hear what I have to say. No one understood right away. Lisa laughed, tried to interrupt, but I wouldn't let her. I opened the will, put on my glasses, and began reading, line by line. I explained that the document had been notarized on November 29, 2021, that 2 lawyers had participated, that everything was registered in accordance with Massachusetts state law. With each sentence, I saw the faces at the table change. I said that the house, the savings, the wealth Henry and I had built over nearly 40 years belonged to me, and me alone, that no agreement or third-party opinion would change what was written on that paper. I looked my son straight in the eye, then looked at Lisa, who blushed, her hand clenching tightly on the napkin. She tried to interrupt me again, saying it wasn't necessary, that it could be resolved as a family. This time, no one supported her. A cousin cleared his throat. My sister-in-law lowered her head. Even my son was speechless. The table fell silent, the only sound the sound of silverware hitting Noah's plate. I continued reading. I explained that, in the event of any attempted challenge, the will required that the entire process be conducted in the presence of lawyers, with no room for manipulation or backroom deals. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to hide her irritation, but control had shifted. When I finished reading, I folded the paper, put it back in the envelope, and left it on the table in front of everyone. The silence was almost uncomfortable. My voice remained firm, without raising my voice. I just wish no one would forget where all this came from. And that respect isn't demanded. It's earned. I looked at my son again, then at Noah, who seemed to understand, even if he didn't grasp every detail. The table stood still for a few seconds, everyone waiting for a reaction. No one had the courage to defend Lisa this time. She remained silent, trying to compose herself, her hands sweating, her eyes filled with anger and a hint of fear. My son could only stare at his plate, the food growing cold without anyone touching it. Noah held my hand under the table, and I felt a bit of that old strength returning. The house, the heritage, the history, all of it was protected. No one was going to erase what I'd built over nearly 8 decades. And as difficult as it was to face everyone there, I knew there was no going back. What happened next, no one in the family would ever forget. For a while, no one moved. The envelope still sat on the table, as if it were a bomb about to explode, and the room felt smaller than ever. Lisa was the first to break the silence, but not in the way everyone expected. She dropped her napkin on her plate, pushed back her chair, and stood, hands clasped at her sides. Her face was flushed, her eyes shining with anger and fear. "This is unfair. I just wanted respect in this house," she tried to say, her voice cracking, but no one responded. My son remained seated, head down, not daring to look anyone in the eye. His cousin avoided looking at me. My sister-in-law pulled Noah closer, trying to distract him with a conversation about dessert, but even he wouldn't leave my side. Lisa began to speak louder, saying she'd always done everything for her family, that she never wanted to see anyone hurt, but her voice trembled in a way that betrayed desperation. I never meant to offend. It was in the heat of the moment. "Everyone makes mistakes," she stammered, but no one dared to support her. The tears began to flow, slowly at first. Then in a rush, she couldn't hold back any longer. It was different from the dry anger I'd seen in the condominium hall. Now what was emerging was fear, pure fear of losing what she thought was already hers. She looked at me, then at the envelope, then at her husband, waiting for a word of support, but he didn't open his mouth. The table fell into such a silence that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Lisa took 2 steps to the side, tripped on the rug, and fell to her knees right in front of me. For the first time, she looked me straight in the eye, without arrogance, without contempt. "Forgive me. Please, don't do this to me," she begged, her voice low, almost a whisper, her face wet with tears. Her hands gripped the hem of my skirt, and it was as if the rest of the world disappeared for a second. The awkwardness was so intense that no one knew where to look. My son stood up, but didn't go over to her. He just stood there, arms hanging down, staring blankly. The others pretended to set the table, fiddle with their phones, anything to avoid looking at the scene. Even Noah, sensing the tense atmosphere, simply squeezed my hand, his eyes wide open, trying to make sense of the moment. I said nothing. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't make a speech. I just sat there, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. What Lisa was doing now was no different from what many people have forced me to swallow my entire life. Shame, fear, the feeling of being at rock bottom. Seeing her on her knees, begging for forgiveness in front of everyone, didn't bring happiness, but an unexpected calm, as if I'd finally put things right. My chest felt tight, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was the knowledge that I no longer had to prove anything to anyone. I just watched, letting each second pass slowly. In that moment, I understood that justice sometimes doesn't look like loud revenge. It's not shouting, it's not fighting, it's silence, it's a firm gaze, it's letting each person feel the weight of what they've done. Lisa knelt for longer than anyone could bear. No one moved to lift her. No one offered a tissue. No hug. It was there, on the floor, with everyone watching, that she felt what it was like to be ignored, to feel the emptiness of contempt, to experience the ice of silence. Justice came without words, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to stand up, not to fight, but to leave with my head held high. The atmosphere at lunch changed forever, and that Sunday, I knew nothing would ever be the same again for anyone at that table. After that Sunday, everything in the house changed. The following days were silent, not because of discomfort, but because of a different calm, that feeling that something truly ended and never came back. No one brought up the subject of the will again. The envelope remained tucked away in my nightstand drawer, along with Henry's letters and old photos. I no longer needed to show any paperwork. The truth spoken in front of everyone had left a deeper impression than any document. Noah started seeking me out more, not just to play or ask for help with his homework, but to talk about everything, from his school friends to what to do when he was scared. One day, on the way back from the park, he looked at me and asked why people sometimes treat people badly when they should be taking better care of them. I answered simply, "Because some people forget what respect is, Noah. But those who maintain their self-worth never lose their dignity." He didn't ask any more questions, just hugged me tightly. That was enough for me. Over time, I realized my presence was no longer seen as a nuisance. My son's gaze changed, less distant, more attentive. He started inviting me to Noah's school meetings, Sunday lunches, and family birthdays. The invitations weren't filled with emotion, but they were respectful. Even Lisa, after that scene, began to speak less, to measure her words, and the relationship was never the same again. The awkwardness still existed, but I wasn't the one feeling it anymore. I started waking up earlier, enjoying the morning sun on the balcony, making coffee slowly, listening to the sounds of the street with a lightheartedness. I realized that age is not a sentence for anyone. No matter how old you are, no one is condemned to accept humiliation in silence. Dignity doesn't depend on the approval of others, but on the courage to demand respect, to remain true to what you've built, even when everyone seems determined to erase your history. Faith, for me, has always been a matter of survival. I'm not one to memorize ready-made phrases or repeat church teachings, but I never lost the habit of praying quietly in my room, asking for strength for another day. It was like this, between silent conversations with God and memories of Henry, that I was able to pick up the pieces and move forward. That episode taught me that strength doesn't lie in not falling, but in rising with ever greater clarity about who you are. And even at rock bottom, there's always a way to start over, as long as you don't accept being treated as less than you deserve. I wondered how many women my age, perhaps right now, are listening to this story and feeling the same pain. People who have been called useless, dead weight, people whose stories are reduced to a single word spoken by someone disrespectful. Don't accept it. Don't let time erase what you've built. Don't wait for others to recognize your worth before you rise up. Rise up even without an audience, even without applause, even if it's just so you can see the difference. Life has taught me that there's no such thing as too late. As long as there's air in your lungs, there's still time to turn things around. No matter your age, no matter if they told you it's past your prime, no matter if they tried to erase you, we demand respect. We don't negotiate dignity, faith, and strength come from within. No one can take them away. And if at any point you feel like you've hit rock bottom, remember, it's from this vantage point that we see the whole sky. If one day someone tells you you're nothing, remember, you're the one who builds your story, and it's always worth fighting for. I thought I had everything under control, but I was completely wrong. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something like this? Were you humiliated in front of everyone and you were left speechless? I want to know what you would do if you were in my shoes. Comment below. Say out loud what's stuck in your throat. And if you've ever faced any kind of injustice, share your story with me. This is the space for those who refuse to be erased. I know this story resonated with you, because it's not just about me, it's about every person who's been left aside, every person who's been told they weren't enough, every voice they tried to silence. You felt it firsthand. Stories like this show us how urgent it is to react, seek justice, and protect our dignity, no matter how many years pass, no matter how many people try to convince you otherwise. When you recognize your own worth, no one will take you away. So, like this now. Cherish this story, because it represents the strength of those who don't remain silent. And subscribe to the channel. Here, each story is a call to never give up on yourself, to remember that respect has no expiration date. This community is for those who have the courage to face the past, transform the present, and inspire the future. You're already a part of it just by coming this far. Keep following real stories that challenge human limits. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that there's still time to turn things around. Stories like these can't be forgotten, because each one is a reminder. Life doesn't end when someone tries to knock you down. It begins again when you decide to stand up. Now, it doesn't stop. What happened here was unbelievable. But what you're about to see challenges everything we think we know about the impossible. The next video is already on screen. Watch now and join me as we discover how far someone will go when all seems lost.